been slightly mixed cues for the Asian markets. The Dow Jones did end just slightly shy of 32,000, and we did see the Brent crude rising over $70 per barrel. Firstly, in terms of the Wall Street indices, the Dow Jones ended shy of 32,000, its all-time high, by the tech sell-off left Nasdaq in the correction territory. Financial firms as well as materials kept losses from being slightly worse. In fact, the Nasdaq tumbled about 3% on Tuesday to its lowest since November and is now down 11% from its all-time high in February. The S&P 500 index did shed intraday gains as the retreat in high valuation stocks did offset a rise in the financials and material shares. The US bond yield did trade slightly shy or slightly below the 1.6% mark, with investors watching upward pressure on the auctions. And do note that this is something that is still concerning both global investors as well as investors back home in Asia and India. The Dow Jones rose nearly around 300 points to close at 31,802. S&P fell 20 points to close at 38,21. Nasdaq fell 310 points to 12,609, and the futures were up nearly around 0.6% overnight. In Asia, the shares were mixed and had a muted open after a rotation out of the growth stocks. In fact, did lead to drive the Nasdaq 100 index into a technical correction. Equities fell modestly in Japan, South Korea, while Australian markets did see some amount of deep cuts following fears of rising Australian yield, which continued to persist. In fact, the Japan's Nikkei did fall nearly around 0.27%. Topix was flat, and stocks in Australia were also down close to around 1.6% in trade. However, in Europe, in fact, we did see some amount of optimism. Shares of banks as well as automakers did lift European shares on Monday as investors continued to move into economy-linked sectors on the hopes of a solid economic rebound from the COVID downturn. In fact, if you look at the indices, FTSE and DAX both were up 1.3%, and DAX was up nearly around 3.3% in trade, while CAC was up close to around 2% in trade. The pan-European stocks 600 also gained close to around 2.2%, its best one-day performance since early November. In fact, if you look at what needs to be watched is, in fact, the European Central Bank meeting later this week, which is likely to show if policymakers have decided to keep the pace in terms of the emergency bond purchases in order to calm the overall financial markets. Oil, of course, has been a lot in focus. The Brent crude oil prices did rise over $70 per barrel on account of attacks in Saudi Arabia. Oil prices, of course, have been in focus on Monday as well after a sharp rise during the Asian trading hours, but cooled off by the afternoon in Europe. The rise came in after Saudi Arabia said that its oil facilities were targeted by missiles and drones on Sunday. In fact, there were also some fresh attacks that's been there, and that's also led to the oil prices rising over $70 per barrel. Last week, OPEC also did state that they would be keeping their output unchanged through April. Brent crude was down, however, to close at somewhere around slightly shy of $70 per barrel. It was down 1.96%, and WTI futures were flat in early morning trade and traded at nearly around $65 per barrel. Gold lost 1.1% to trade at $1,680 an ounce on fears of rise in interest rates, and gold futures were trading up by nearly around 0.2% to $1,682 an ounce. And yes, gold has been sliding since it's quite a few weeks now, and I guess it should be down at least over 15% from its recent peak.